Mosoma. Alumuna sisi au ya sama kosa. Amuna yeye, sama kosa.
Hello, this is Tempo Afric TV's Beyond the Headlines program, and I'm your host, Petros Haile. Today we have a couple of special guests, lawyers, and we have Kwame Osafo-Addo from Kwame's law firm, and we also have Ernest Wiafe from Ernest Wiafe Law. Welcome back, guest. I know we had you before.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming back again.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
and the discussion for today will be on two subjects. Kwame will talk about Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's history and some of its achievements, while Ernest will talk about President Trump's executive order temporarily banning travel from the 7 Muslim majority countries. Thank you. So we can go directly to the question, and I wanted to start with Ernest. My first question is, President Trump's executive order temporary banning from the 7 Muslim majority countries. Who are those countries and why the executive order?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So basically, as we all know, about 2 weeks ago, the president issued an executive order banning certain countries. Now the issue is, how did he come to this decision? We first have to look at it from the U.S. Constitution. Under Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution, it gives the President of the United States the power to actually issue executive orders within his power in the Constitution. And also, anytime a president issues an executive order, it is a directive that pretty much he tells his administrative officials and federal agencies to enforce certain laws in this country. So here, about 2 weeks ago, the president issued an executive order banning 7 Muslim majority countries. And the goal here is he claims that it is there to protect the nation from terrorism. Within that executive order, he listed 7 Muslim majority countries. And as you all may remember, during his campaign, he had made an assertion that if he became a president, he would ban Muslims from entering the U.S.
Yes.
So we will go into detail as to how some courts have ruled in this case, and also how the court interpreted his executive order. But the 7 countries are mainly Iran, Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Yemen,
And Afghanistan.
and I think
Is it Afghanistan?
no, Afghanistan is not on it. I believe it's Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Syria, Somalia,
And Libya.
and then Libya. Yes.
Yeah, Libya. Yeah.
Sorry for the blackout.
That's
So
all right, yeah.
predominantly, so when he issued this executive order, he said he was trying to protect the nation from Islamic terrorism. But as you've heard most of the pundits in the social media and all over the news outlets, none of the citizens from any of the 7 countries came from any of, none of the terrorists came from any of the 7 countries. And we believe that the way and manner in which this president issued this executive order doesn't fall in line with the Constitution. So that is how he is having this issue with the courts. And I mean, let the truth be told, you can see the arguments on both ways. But I think the truth is he cannot get, it's going to be hard for him to actually get this order to go through.
Okay. In line with that answer, when people talk about executive order, there's a lot of misunderstanding. Does that mean he can override Congress and implement his order, or is there a time limit, time frame for it?
No, he cannot. The president cannot, executive branch or the president cannot override Congress. So if you look at the history of this country, the last time a major immigration reform was passed in this country was back in 1986.
Okay.
And since 86 to now, which has been over 31 years, there hasn't been any major immigration reform by Congress. And as we all know, the last president was Ronald Reagan that actually passed the Immigration Reform Act in 86.
Okay.
Since then, we've had President H. Bush, W. Bush, Clinton, and Obama. They've all tried, but they haven't been able to issue any substantial immigration reform. So pretty much the issue here is, does the president have the power to make decisions on immigration? If you look at the Constitution itself, it says that Congress will pass the immigration law, and then the president will actually sign it off. That's how the rule actually is supposed to be. But if Congress fails to act, that is when the president will use his executive order or executive power to implement something. So if you remember 2, 3, 4 years ago, President Obama issued what we call DACA for dreamers. There were kids that have been in the country for a long time that came here when they were kids, went to high school. And they were, now he was able to use his executive order to allow them to find temporary work and get them work permit to give them power to live here. Contrary to that, he also tried to issue what we call DAPA. That was for parents of U.S. citizens or green card holders that have been in the country since 2009. That can show that they've had continuous presence over here. But in that case, the case didn't go nowhere because it's similar to this executive order. President Obama issued executive order, but in that case, Texas brought a federal lawsuit similar to what Seattle is doing now, which we'll go into detail. And the judge in that case said that the president doesn't have the power to issue that executive order on the DAPA group of people. But the case went to the Court of Appeals, and they stayed the Texas District Court decision, and then it went to Supreme Court last year in June. And the case was tied. It was 4-4 because, as you know, there's a vacant position in the Supreme Court due to the death of Antonin Scalia a year ago from now. So it was 4-4. So that was a standing case where we won with Texas decision. That's how we see this case going that direction.
We'll come back to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll go back to Kwame. Kwame is going to tell us Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and what its impact on the overall population, and some basic information if you can help us out.
Okay. So yeah, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is another area where we might see some changes, where we might see this administration make some changes. Now, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it was originally designed to protect consumers in their dealings with financial services industry. It was also supposed to protect consumers from abuses in the payday, student, and auto lending industries. It was originally created in 2011 by consumer advocates stalwarts like Elizabeth Warren. And back then, it was partly in response to reports of deceptive mortgage lending practices, which some believe created the housing crisis, the market crash in 2008.
Okay.
So pretty much it was supposed to, long story short, it's supposed to protect consumers in their financial dealings with companies out there.
Okay. And we'll come back to some of the controversies about it and some of the achievements throughout the year. I believe it
Since
started
2011.
2011?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kwame. Now to come back to Ernest, regarding the travel ban,
Okay.
many court rulings filed in New York, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Washington State, lawsuit filed in Seattle as well.
Right.
That lawsuit issued a temporary restraining order.
Okay.
I know that the government filed a notice of appeal recently.
Right.
Is there any new developments on the status of the rulings, or for that matter, on the appeal?
Okay, so when we look at these court cases here, if you remember the first time this executive order was put in place, there was the first lawsuit actually originated from New York in Brooklyn court.
Okay.
And in that case, the judge actually granted TRO, temporary restraining order. And what the judge said in that case was, it will create irreprehensible harm to American citizens or to just refugees, to people that have valid visas or that have been granted the refugee status. And they can be sent back home because that's going to be considered something negative or bad
Okay.
for Americans to be portrayed around the world. And then there was also a lawsuit in Boston, Massachusetts. And in that case, the judge said that because the plaintiff in this case haven't shown that they have a good merit on the case to win the case, she is not going to rule or extend the TRO, which is temporary restraining order. Between these two judges, the judge in Boston is Republican appointed judge.
Okay.
The judge in Brooklyn is also Democratic appointed judge. And then about a week ago, the state of Minnesota and Seattle joined to file a lawsuit to challenge this executive order. One thing I want to make clear is this. With all these lawsuits that are being filed, they're not filing the lawsuit based on the main merits of the case.
Okay.
They are filing these suits based on temporary restraining order. Just that the argument is, don't allow, let's put a temporary hold on this executive order. In the case of Minnesota and Seattle, the argument was this: most of their professors and also most of their students work in the state, they do research in the state, and with this executive order, it's creating harm to the state, it's affecting their businesses. And even with the technology companies such as Amazon and Expedia, these are companies that are in the state of Washington, in Seattle. They supported the lawsuit against the government. And their argument was this: we try to retain the best and the brightest around the world to help with our business. So with this executive order in place, it is affecting our business. And that was the position that Seattle was on in this case. And the one question that the judge asked the government was this: how can you show that this executive order has how can you show that the 7 countries that were banned had somehow, some shape or form committed terrorist acts in this country? And the question was, has anybody from these 7 countries committed terrorism on American soil? And the answer to the judge was no.
Since 9/11.
Since 9/11. So the biggest thing on this case was, if you look at the case in Boston and the case in New York, they issued a temporary executive order based on just their jurisdiction. But this judge took his case a little bit further up. What he said was, because of the power that was given to him, and he actually cited a case in Texas with the same case about the DAPA case that was used to defeat President Obama's executive order on immigration about a year ago. And he actually, when he cited that case, he applied that this temporary restraining order that he is issuing should be applied across the whole country. That actually brought a big blow to the president's cabinet or his administration. So that is how we were able to see that all of these travel bans were immediately stopped. So CBP, which is Custom and Border Protection agencies, USCIS, Immigration, Department of Homeland Security, that falls under immigration, decided to operate business as normal pre-executive order being in place. So that is the main thing here. And then the case was taken up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to listen to this. And that's something that we'll go into detail later in the discussion.
I'm glad you mentioned it, so I might as well ask you that question, then you can elaborate it. How does the recent decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals affect the refugee process currently? And at the same time, did it affect green card holders?
Okay, so basically the decision that was issued by the judge in Seattle, the Ninth Circuit of Appeals, if you also look at the three judges, two were democratically appointed judges, and one was a Republican appointed judge. And all three judges unanimously upheld the lower court decision, saying that the TRO, the temporary restraining order, is warranted at this time. So to answer your question, because of the decision from the Court of Appeals in the Ninth Circuit, it hasn't actually affected it now, because temporarily the court have said that the president cannot enforce his executive order. So business is as usual. But one thing we should also notice, when the executive order was put in place, it affected about 60,000 people that were issued visas already, that were either on their way coming here or were in the process of moving to the United States. Recently, about last week, the place that I do volunteer work at, Lutheran Social Services, they do a lot of refugee resettlements. They are one of the agencies in the state of Minnesota that actually resettle people in the state of Minnesota. There was a 4-year-old child who had been separated from her mom for about 2-3 years now. At the time the mom was coming, she didn't understand, she didn't talk to the right people, so she listened to the wrong people, and then she left her child behind. And they were separated for about 3 years or so. So the child was actually on her way coming here, but they also on her way coming here when the order was put in place. So that actually affected it. But as we can see, to answer your question, how the recent decision, as we can, the kid is here now. They were actually on the news just about a couple of days ago because of the decision by the judge in Seattle and the Ninth Circuit upholding that decision. The kid was able to move to the United States and reunite with her mother. So I think there remains a lot to be seen. The case is most likely going to be taken by the Supreme Court. I think as it stands right now, if we look at the current bench, which is 8 judges, it's going to be similar to what we saw a year ago with the DAPA issue. Assuming that the case go to the Supreme Court and then the current judge who was renominated by the president last week has not been confirmed by the court, by Congress,
Congress, yeah.
then most likely, I think, in my professional opinion, I think it might end up being 4-4, and then the lower court decision might be the rule, or might be the standing law. But at the same time, too, we all know that the manner in which the president carried out this executive order wasn't the best way. So it is our understanding that his administration are now thinking about going back to the drawing board and then reissuing the executive order.
Okay.
That, technically, legally, he can issue executive order, but I think the way in which this one was done makes it a bit problematic
For him.
right now.
Yeah,
But
I got a question with that, though.
Okay.
Okay, if it goes to the Supreme Court judge,
yeah.
and as you say, it is 4-4,
Uh-huh.
do we know the opinion of those judges in advance, or it has to be submitted first?
Yeah, we don't know.
We don't
And
know.
actually, as of now, none of the judges can comment on the case because it's a case that can come in front of them, so they will not comment on that. But historically, we know that judges tend to go certain ways, left or right. And currently on the bench now, we know that 4 judges are most likely to go on upholding, and then 4 might go against it. But assuming that the new appointed judge is confirmed, maybe we might be having a different conversation from now. One thing that I also want to talk about is in terms of the ambiguity of this executive action. Even though it said it affected refugees and people applying for visas to come to the United States from these 7 countries, we also know that it affected green card holders that were actually from these countries. And the government actually said that with the green card holders that this as if other affects, they were going to look on it case-by-case basis. And if you look at it, on its core principle, it kind of violates the Constitution of the United States in terms of the due process, equal protection clause and all that, which is the 14th and the 15th Amendments. And then also, even as an American, you have the right to travel. It is actually a constitutional right. That was a case that was decided. So even for a green card holder to be affected in that way, I think overall we all understand, most of us understand that this was a bad enacted executive
Okay.
order that was issued by the president.
So we have a long way to go before we resolve these
Oh,
issues.
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Ernest. I'll go back to Kwame. Kwame, I'm back on the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. When it was created it was created after the financial meltdown to protect consumer rights. Can you give us examples of CFPB achievements, and what is in the new administration take on the activities of CFPB?
Most definitely. So I looked up some facts, and according to the CFPB website, since 2011, they had returned roughly $11.8 billion to about 29 million customers since 2011. And this organization had certain priorities. So one of the areas they were looking at was dealing with phony accounts. And I'm sure your viewers do remember the issues with Wells Fargo. In that case, they were accused of pretty much setting up phony accounts for their customers. And so these customers were getting unexpected fines and charges coming from these phony accounts. So they fined Wells Fargo for $100 million. And in all, Wells Fargo has ended up having to pay about $185 million to various governmental agencies. Along the same lines, dealing with phony accounts, PayPal was accused of the same thing. They also set up phony accounts. They had to pay customers up to $15 million. And they were also fined an extra $10 million. Another area they looked at was with bad for-profit colleges. So with the for-profit colleges, one that they sued was a college called Corinthian College.
Mm-hmm.
This college had been boasting about fake job prospects to attract low-income students, and these students were pretty much put in a situation where they had to take out private loans to cover that tuition, even though these loans were often at higher interest rates. Those guys were fined, I think, $500 million by the CFPB. With credit card companies, they fined Bank of America and FIA Card Services because these companies had allegedly signed their customers up for credit monitoring and credit report, credit monitoring and credit repair, and the customers never asked for their service. Okay, so they were fined $727 million. So they've done the same with in the mortgage practices industry, discriminatory lending. So with the mortgage practices, for example, there was a company called Ocwen that specialized in subprime and delinquent loans, and they were forced to have to relieve their customers of about $2 billion worth of loan obligations, because pretty much those loan agreements were just canceled because there were too many problems with them. So they, since the inception, they've always been on the side of the consumer. Now, this current administration wants to make certain changes to the structure of the organization. The way it's set up right now, when it was first created, it had one director, and that director was appointed by Obama, and Richard Cordray. He was also confirmed by the Senate in 2013. Now his tenure goes till 2018.
Okay.
The way they had the position set up, he cannot just be fired without cause. You know, he has to do something pretty bad to get fired. Now, the reason why we feel that there are going to be some changes with this particular area was that this administration has hinted that they don't like the work of Richard Cordray so far. They claim that some of the regulations that the CFPB has put in place has reduced the amount of lending that community banks are able to do. Because they claim that the regulations are overburdensome, and therefore the smaller banks are not able to, pay for all these regulations, so they go out of business. Okay, so so that's one reason why we think that is going to change the structure of the organization. Another thing that could affect the structure of the organization is that there's a case in New Jersey right now. And that case in particular is trying to figure out if the single director structure is constitutional or not. Okay, so that if that outcome claims that the structure is unconstitutional, then it could change. Okay, so the solution that the Republicans have, instead of having a single director, they propose having a multi-member panel that controls this organization. Right now, the director doesn't have to report to Congress. He's paid by, the organization is funded by the Federal Reserve. Okay, if the new administration have their own way, they want it to be controlled by Congress. But we all know when you have one director versus having 7 or 8 directors, it's so much harder to steer the organization if you have several directors. So consumer advocates really believe that if that structure changes, then the organization might become a whole lot weaker. They won't be able to protect consumers the same way they've been able to do in the past.
So the people who advocate the one director saying that it's much more effective.
Much more effective. It's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier to get to go in one direction, right? But you know, the counter argument is if you have a rogue as your driver, then it could, you know, you don't have Congress pretty much controlling this director. So that is what's going on. But if you look at it from the perspective of the consumer, I mean, this is an organization that just returned 11.8 billion. Without this organization's activities, that money could have been, you know, totally lost. So, that's
So what the boss, is it based on a party line? Sometimes it sounds like it's like.
Usually it's based on party lines. So typically, the Democrats would be more concerned about the consumers, and the Republicans, the business
community.
So yeah.
Oh, okay. So we'll just wait and see, right?
Yeah, it's a wait and see approach. The good news is the New Jersey case.
Okay.
Even if it's decided, the belief is that if it says that the single structure is unconstitutional, it's most likely that it will be fought to the Supreme Court. So we still do have some time. As consumers, we don't. The agency will be able to do its work. Plus, Richard Cordray is supposed to be in position. He cannot just be fired. So he's supposed to have his position till 2018. So it looks so far as if that organization could still stay in its current structure.
Yeah, based on its record too, you know. If
based on the good things that they've done,
achievements, All right. Thank you, Kwame.
Thank you.
I'll ask a last question for both of you, and I'll start with Ernest. I know you offer a free consultation at the Lutheran Social Services on immigration-related issues. Could you tell us what sort of advice and how often?
So pretty much I volunteer at Lutheran Social Services every Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We give consultation on a variety of immigration-related issues, such as refugees that are here that want to file for their family members to come and join them, or even American citizens that want to apply for their relatives to come and join them here, or even green card holders that wants to apply for citizenship and naturalization to become a U.S. citizen. So in terms of the advice that we give, is very broad, because Lutheran Social Services is a non-profit organization here in Minnesota. They do a lot of refugee resettlement program. At the same time, too, they do a lot of immigration assistance, help people with their immigration matters. So, you know, in terms of what we do, you know, is very broad as to areas of advice that we provide to and potential clients.
Is there a day that you know, our viewers can identify and come?
Yes, Lutheran Social Services on Park Avenue, right in Minneapolis, and every Tuesday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. it's a walk-in clinic where anybody can just walk in, put their name down, and then they will be seen by an immigration advocate or myself, who will help them answer their immigration questions. And also, if they need assistance, Lutheran Social Services does that too as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Ernest. And I'll ask the same questions to Kwame. I know you work with the Volunteers Lawyers Network on housing issues. And again, how often and what kind of advice do you provide to your clients? Yeah.
So I work for the Volunteer Lawyers Network, and I work in 3 different clinics. I work for their bankruptcy clinic, I work for their debt collection defense clinic, and then I also work in their housing court clinic. So for housing court, I usually go there. It's usually open, I think, for for everyone from I think 8 o'clock in the morning to about 4:30 in the afternoon, and it's usually staffed by volunteer attorneys from the Volunteer Lawyers Network. What they mainly do is they help clients that are facing eviction or clients that want to expunge their evictions. So the housing court pretty much just prepares clients that are ready, that need to be in courts that day, or that have court coming up. And sometimes we even have attorneys go into court with the clients, but those clients have to meet certain financial requirements. You have to, if you make too much money, you don't qualify for those. Similarly, I work for the bankruptcy clinic, and that is, the way that works is the clients typically just goes in, and if they do qualify for bankruptcy, then we work together. I don't go in on a particular day. And it's the same with debt collection defense. If the client meets the financial requirements, then if they do have abusive debt collectors, if they have any financial issues going on, I work with them, and so it's not a particular set time that we work together.
Okay, but from time to time, but you're available.
Yes.
Okay.
But and apart from the Volunteer Lawyers Network, I also want your viewers to know that there's legal aid. There are other organizations out there that provide free legal advice, especially a lot of the challenge with getting good legal advice is the financial aspect. So there are organizations out there. Clients just need to be a little bit more vigilant and try to research a little bit, and they will be able to find someone to help them out. Yeah.
Thank you. Glad you guys came and gave us this highly informative discussion.
Thank you.
And in fact, part of our project is we would like to invite professionals from time to time and listen to their advice. So again, I'd like to thank you for taking your time to be in our studio. Kwame Osafo Ado from Kwame's Law Firm, Ernest Weafe from Ernest Weafe Law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On this note, we end today's program. We'll see you with a different guest next week. Until then, have a nice one. Thank you.
Mama ku, mama sa, mama ku sa, mama ku, mama sa, mama ku sa, mama ku, mama sa, mama ku sa, mama ku, mama sa, mama ku sa. Sumanye. Atele. Mosoma, Mosoma. Alumuna sisi au yasa makosa. Amuna yeye, koma sama kosa.